Welcome to Homeschool Help Desk. This session is Real Life in Homeschool, and I'm joined with Camille Kirksey. She is the founder of Intuitive Homeschooler and also the author of Coming Home, a quick and practical guide for preparing a mother's heart, mind, and home for homeschooling. Welcome, Camille. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, first of all, let's just talk a little bit about yourself. Can you just introduce yourself to our audience and let them know just who you are and what makes you tick?
Sure. So I'm Camille Kirksey. I'm a wife, a mom, homeschooler of 3 kids, 13, 9, and 6. We've been homeschooling for about 8.5 years now. And I'm doing a lot of different things. So I'm an author now. I have a really engaged community over on Instagram and Facebook for my, alter ego, the Intuitive Homeschooler. And we just talk about real life homeschooling things. And what I really try to do is just give people the real deal behind the scenes. I may do it in a funny way. I may do it in a really intuitive and deep introspective way, because I really believe that homeschooling is a way, and it's like an extension of parenting. And it's a way that we can learn and heal and grow alongside with our kids. So I spend most of my days online with homeschoolers, ranging from newbies to veterans. And we just talk about real things. We have fun and we get serious too, because, homeschooling involves all that kind of stuff.
It certainly does. I'd like to encourage our audience to use the chat box on the side of the screen if you have any questions for Camille as we're going through this talk. We would like to talk about Camille's book, Coming Home. You're going to get an opportunity to enter to win a drawing for your choice of the print copy or an ebook along with the workbook that she created to go along with it. So be looking for that as we're in our talk. Camille, let's talk about your book a little bit. What prompted you to write this beautiful, heartfelt instruction guide to parents coming into homeschooling?
So when I started a long time ago now, I wanted to know it all. You come into it, you have all these questions. And I found over the years that I asked the wrong questions. And I saw as I got more into it and really took it on as a lifestyle more than just a learning style, I saw that the new people that were coming in were doing the same things that I was doing and asking the same questions. And so once my community grew and I started doing different things in the media, people would come to me. Oh, it popped up. Come to me and ask, how do I start homeschooling? What do I need to do first? And I would always offer them information that they weren't ready for. They thought I was going to tell them, this is the curriculum you should use, and this is find out your child's learning style, and all the typical things that you find when you Google how to homeschool. And so instead of doing a blog post or doing YouTube videos, I really thought I should just put this in a book and give people what I wish I would have had before I started. Because I found that a lot of the things that are normal, that when you go and you Google, kind of are ahead of where you really are when you start. When you start, you really need to nail down the foundation of what you want your homeschool lifestyle to be, and not just what you want your academics to look like or your schedule to look like. And so I wrote the book to try to give moms mostly, but people in general, those practical tips and that motivation to say, hey, you can do it. And here are things that I think, I know over time I was able to figure out, like, oh, this would have been helpful to know instead of going down this path. I really needed to keep it more simple and intentional. So I decided to write a book about it.
I love how you really talk about we're asking the wrong questions when we start homeschooling. And when I began my journey almost 5 years ago now, I was asking the wrong questions. We think the things about academics and curriculum, all of that is there, right? But as I was reading through your book and realizing, like, I was one of those people that didn't prepare myself, my heart, my mind, my home. And why hadn't anybody told me that part of it? So I was very appreciative for your book. Was super excited to read it. And I hope that our audience gets a chance to win a copy. If not, they know how to find a copy on Amazon so that they can read it. In your book, you ask, it says, are my heart, mind, and home prepared for homeschooling? Why do you think that was the right question to ask when you were putting this all together?
Because it's what was missing 5 years into it. 5 years into homeschooling my oldest child was 10 at that time, and I was ready to quit. I was looking for schools. I was booking tours. I was done because it felt too hard. And I just felt like, what am I doing? The kids they're not engaged. They don't like the things. And I go about trying to figure all this out, and I just fail every time. And so when I really started doing the self-care and the work on myself to ask the better questions, that's what I encourage my audience to do. Ask better questions. Adults, we have to ask better questions. So instead of looking out into the world of Google and other homeschoolers, I asked myself, okay, what's missing? And so when I started with this book, I said, if I was going to start over, where do I think I would start? And it just came to me. It wasn't something I figured out. It literally just was like implanted into my mind. I need to start with my heart. Because I even thought mind, we always think we can think ourselves into and out of things. But when I really started thinking and researching, like how decisions are made and how do you grow as a person? And because those are the questions that really don't get asked. You're just told to do it, but you don't really get told how to do it, like those steps. It just brought me back to that essential question. Like, have I done the hard work? Have I prepared my mind to do it? And lastly, the home is such a no-brainer, but it's never mentioned. And it's something that you have to deal with every day. And so, yeah, that's where I came up with the concept and the essential question of how can I do this without preparing those three essential things? Otherwise, nothing's really going to work. You're just going to be spinning your wheels. And I went and did that and found that that's the question. That's the essential question I should have asked in the beginning.
I love that this self-discovery that you were on took 5 years, right? And so it's a comfort to our audience who are watching it. If you have been doing this for a while, it's okay that you stop and go back to the beginning and maybe lay these foundations and then restart. There's grace there. You don't know what you don't know, right? And that's Absolutely. How I felt when I read through your book. I was like, I just didn't know this. I didn't know to ask these questions. I didn't know to prepare my heart and get ready for homeschooling. And so, just as an encouragement to those who are watching, like, it's not too late.
Absolutely not. No, I had one of the first people I asked to read my book was a veteran mom. We both know her, Candace. And she's graduated a child and she's well into homeschooling years and years. And she said this book still taught her things. It helped her realize during her summers where she, I guess normally picks new curriculum and all the stuff we do. This is something that she's going to go back to because I wrote it thinking I was talking to newbies, but I'm really talking to all of us because at every stage, there's an opportunity for us to grow. And I think when we're focused on us as well as the kids, everybody benefits. So yeah, it really is. You have to go inside first. And I just don't think, as a society, we are really trained to do that. It's everything that's external. But just my own life, I just find anytime I'm trying to solve a problem, I have to go to me. Like, what is it because I'm the only one that can control me, can't control my kids or anything else. So, yeah.
That was a bombshell to learn, even as homeschooling. I can't control my kids.
No.
Just let that one go first and foremost. There's no control. Yeah, there's discipline, right? But there's...
Yeah, because they're people, they're individuals. And yes, there are kids, quote unquote, but they're people. They have their own mind, their own personality and disposition and they grow. So they don't even stay the same. The same thing you were doing 2 years ago, they're different. They're older and, yeah. But to your point, another homeschool mom who she's been doing a long time. She told me probably about year 3 is when you start really getting confidence. And I was like, oh, okay. So it takes 3 years. But then 2 years later, I was like, oh, no, it's not always that. You do start to feel better, but it's still those up and downs, especially if you're coming into it with little kids. You know, that's a different ball game than older kids too. So yeah, it's never too late to really start over for that.
Yeah. I think that is a sentiment that is really, we should just be walking around with. It's never too late for any of us to start over in anything. We don't know everything there is to know about everything. And I don't know where we misstepped in our society that we kind of put that on, that, oh, we can't relearn things. We absolutely can relearn things. And when you're homeschooling your children, you better be willing to relearn things, or there's going to be a lot of misery.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why I know somewhere in the book, I talked about, like the deschooling or maybe I haven't. I've talked about there are all these things, so many places. But one thing that you do have to remember that this is a unlearning. That's what I talked about. This unlearning. So it's kind of like deschooling, but this unlearning that we all are constantly doing. I always think of it like an onion. Like you're just going to peel away those layers, and it's a new layer, and it's always going to be an opportunity to do better. And it's not that you're trying to be perfect, but just you're. I guess my thought is always that you're here to grow, and anything that happens is for you. So when you homeschool, it's a whole different ball game. People think of it, oh, it's just the academics. That's, that's the primary, because people come from a school background. And so that's all most people don't know, homeschoolers don't. The image and narrative that's out there is not one that's a whole lifestyle. It's just, oh, these kids got into Harvard at 12, and that's just not realistic. And anybody who homeschools know we're doing our best. And absolutely, we're growing right along with the kids.
Yeah, that's a great point. Also, you hit the nail on the head. I think when we're homeschooling, it's a holistic approach. It's the whole child. It is not just what they can write on a piece of paper, what they can read, how fast they can read through a book, or how they're doing in mathematics. But when we come out of a public schooling idea, those are the only things that you have to go off of, right? Because you're not the teacher. You're not in the classroom. You haven't been in the classroom with your children. And so now all of a sudden there's a meld of child emotion and maturity and education. And I think that when they combined, especially when you're first beginning to homeschool, it's overwhelming as the mom to see all of that and its fullness. And you're like, oh, I just thought I was giving you some math sheets to work on today. Yeah. And we put that in our title, that there are no homeschool hats. So I'd love for you to just kind of speak to our audience about this idea of why, as a parent, you are the perfect person to be teaching your child.
Well, one of the things that I absolutely did not want to do when I started was to be this teacher, focused experience for my kids. I didn't want to be, because that's not the type of parent I try to be. I don't want to be, honestly, I don't want to be in charge. Like, I really don't. I want them to grow, obviously I know my responsibilities, but that is not my goal, because I understand just being a kid and seeing like, oh, well, I know stuff and I can do stuff. And, my parents don't have to teach me everything. I wanted to give my kids that freedom. So when I came into homeschooling, I didn't understand at first, like, oh, I don't have to be a teacher. Like, I'm not replacing the school. But what I ended up realizing is that I'm a student and I'm a teacher and I'm this and I'm that. And all that summed up to be mom. Like, I didn't have to do anything other than being their mom, because being mom encompasses so much. You're their biggest cheerleader. You're their advocate. You're their ally. You know these children better than anybody on this planet. You were, given the responsibility to raise them and obviously be a facilitator of their education. So, when people say they lack confidence, I think it comes from thinking they have to have this teacher training. You have to have dealt with other children. But if you're an engaged mother, like most mothers or parent in general, you know your kids. Or you're more willing to get to know them. Because like you said, if they do, because my kids, one of them went to school, but he was little, so I didn't have to overcome that, shock. But, you don't really know your kids how they learn best, because in school, there's only one way to do it. But in homeschooling, you have to give them space and yourself grace to figure that out. So if you go into it with this, okay, now I have my teacher hat on, you're going to think, I know it all. I have to do it all. I have to discipline. I can't be mom. And that's a lot of pressure, so I just embrace, as a mother, I'm very fluid. I do what they need, like bottom line. So I don't know why that would be any different with the homeschool part of it.
Yeah, I think that part of relearning as parents, back to that idea that it's not separated. You're already teaching your children every day. We had a speaker on before who was like, you taught your kids how to be potty trained. You taught your kids how to properly have good hygiene. Like you naturally teach your children. I think maybe one of the biggest struggles that parents who are coming into homeschooling have is this idea of they have to look a certain way or put on that teacher hat, like you're saying. And your kids know that's not your role. Right. They know what a teacher and what the mom is. And so when you try to move from one to the other, they're going to call you out quicker than anybody. They're going to push back harder than anybody. Yep. And then you have this power struggle within your home, and parents are like, well, I just can't do this. I don't have the patience for it. It's like that we are giving you permission to know that you're already a teacher. You're already their mom, instructing them in everyday situations. It is no different when you're homeschooling.
None. Even with curriculum, even with, all the things that the stereotypical part of homeschooling, just like if your child is sick, you're going to go to Google or if, to your medicine cabinet or whatever it is, and you're going to assess what they need and you're going to meet that need. You're not going to, unless you need outside assistance, you're not going to think, oh, I can't do this. It's more so, how can I do this? And so that gets back to what I'm saying. It's the better question. You have to ask yourself the better question of, if I can't do it, why can't I do it? And how can I figure it out? Because it's no different than anything else. If they fall and they break their arm, you're going to do what you need to do to get that fixed. So there is no separation. You're always going to, and I love how you said the kids are going to call you out, because I think a lot of people do try to separate, and the kids are wise and they know in front of me is my mom, or in front of me is dad or grandma, whoever. Why are they doing this? And they're not going to be able to verbalize that, but their energy is going to be like, no, we need to come on back. So, if you're a teacher, your teacher, and it's unfortunate, but your teacher can't come and hug you when you're upset. You can't just stop and be silly. And, that's not what teachers are there to do. So, but moms will. Moms know if you need a minute. I have a trampoline, go jump on the trampoline. You can't do that at school, but moms let you do that. So yeah, it's finding that balance. It's not, and the thing is, nobody can teach you that. Like you said, you just have to give yourself permission to find those solutions and feel like whatever comes, I can handle, because I'm mom or I'm dad.
Yeah. Well, in my personality type, I'm a check the box, do what I'm told. I like very clear instructions. And when I came into homeschooling my children, they're second generation. So I homeschooled for 5 years, and I actually was older in my high school years. So I did it on my own. So when I came into it, that was my experience. And I thought my kids should just be able to homeschool themselves because I did it. So here I was like, here's your stuff, get your stuff done. Well, my kids are totally different than me. They've had an upbringing that was totally different than I had. So I was wondering why I kept hitting my head against the wall going, this is no fun. This is supposed to be fun. All these Instagram moms are having fun with their kids, and I'm in tears and they're in tears and we're power struggling. And then I started to realize, well, I'm doing it the way I think it should be done, not the way it can be done, because it can look different. It doesn't have to be in the box. It doesn't have to be the same way I was taught. And it took me a couple of years to figure it out.
No, that's normal. That's absolutely normal. That's the good and bad of social media. When you go on, you see these perfect homeschool spaces, and the children are so engaged and they just love their stuff. And like my boys did not have a preference on anything. They did not like dinosaurs. They didn't like, anything particular. So when I saw these kids like so into something, I was like, oh, why aren't my kids doing that? And they just didn't. And so a lot of that struggle is just our mindset. Mm-hmm. It's really something we have to just realize, like, it does not have to look a certain way, and it really shouldn't. And two, some parents, as you do it, you try to do the same things with your younger kids that you did with your older kids. And so we want to have this play-by-play certainty, and it's just not that. It's just not that. And I think that the mindset of not just going with what's needed at like this just in time, like in business, this just in time approach to your kids has to be what you do. Otherwise, you are going to be miserable, and it's not going to ever feel good. And that would be really sad, you know. Yeah. But that doesn't have to be the case.
And for our first-time homeschoolers who are coming into this during a pandemic, so yes. You have financial stress, you have health stress, you have lack of community stress. I mean, there's so many stressors. So I really want to speak to our audience and just say, you just have to accept grace for this year. You've done the best you could, and you do better when you know better. And so you've done a good job. Like, give yourself a pat on the back. It's been a hard year. And homeschooling, we don't want to say, you know, it's hard, but we're not going to lie and say that it's easy, right? It's as hard as we make it. It's as hard as we as parents make it to be, honestly. Because I have one, and she is strong-willed from the time. I mean, she was like breached. She was like, I'm not even coming out the way you want me to come out. Like, she, from the very beginning, she put her foot down, and she has never taken her foot back up. Yes. And there was just things that I was like, it has to be done this way. And she's pushed back. She's like, why? I got it done. What does it matter how I got it done? And I was like, that made me go, you're questioning my authority. I'm the one in charge here. And it was like really was a pride thing. And I don't want to speak to the fact, I mean, there is discipline in the house, right? There is authority. So we're not saying like laissez-faire, let your kids be whatever they're going to be. But when she could come to me and give me a very logical step-by-step why she wanted to do it her way, I had to like swallow my pride and go, well, she's getting it done. Who am I to say it's wrong if she wants to do it this way? It's not the way I would do it. But I mean, that's the kind of stuff that even just as parents, whether you homeschool or not, those little lessons, open communication for you to have with, especially as they get into those teenage years. Like,
yes, I'm there now. I have a 13-year-old. So, it's about that ego check, you know, and I used it. I've just done personal study just outside of homeschooling, I guess. And I use my ego to check myself, because my ego will say, oh, you know, you're the adult and that's the child. But then who I really am comes in and says, well, you know what? You're a precocious child. You're a child who questioned. And a lot of parents have to really get real. You have children that are probably like you. And a lot of times when you see that behavior and it reminds you of yourself, you're like, oh no. And not in a bad way, but we don't always want to. I just say kids are our mirrors. So they're going to show us the stuff, and they're going to force us to be better, whether we like it or not. And the sooner we accept that they are really there trying to not intentionally help us, but they are showing us those opportunities to heal, then we can be okay with being wrong. We can be okay with listening to them and following their lead. It does not mean I don't lead in some scenarios, but I guess my ego is not in it. Like, I'm not there to do what I think is right. There are certain things I have in place because I do know better in certain situations. But, you know, when it comes to math, the only reason people say, and I'm not a math person, but the only reason schools say they have to do it a certain way is because this is what's designed and this is what is going to work with the masses of the children. Whereas when you're a homeschooler, it's kind of like, well, you know, if the kid gets it, unless there's a specific reason why they have to do it that way, What's the problem? Because people come and say with like Common Core is supposed to help you think critically and think outside the box. So let them. Like it's all this talk, of all kids should do this, but parents don't want to all the time because we're afraid, because that's uncharted territory, But I think homeschooling gives everybody the space to grow and feel safe and talk to your kids. And because I want my children, when they're grown, to come and talk to me the same way they talk to me now. So I have to create this space that is open in all time, not just, outside of homeschool. If it's something my 13-year-old said, Mom, I don't want to do fractions. This is dumb and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, well, what's going on? I just want to learn real life stuff like checkbooks and savings and debit cards. That's math. Let's do it. So I could have been like, well, no, you have to do this because no. He'll find a reason to come back to it if he needs to. Because honestly, once I got out of college, that's when my learning started, because I was able to explore the things and learn on my own time. And, college helped, but I'm not doing what I went to college for. So, I just think we have to just get real as parents and give ourselves space and realize our kids need the same. Yeah. It's not hard. That's not hard, but it is hard.
Well, it's that giving up of control. I mean, we can control very little, honestly, in this life. So the things that we feel like we can control, if there's any friction to try to take that away, I think as our human nature just wants to grab onto it and say, no, this is mine. This is how I control it. And it doesn't bode well in homeschooling. It really doesn't bode well in life in general. Right. I think we're beginning to see this, but I think it's so evident when we're homeschooling our children. Yeah. I would love to know in the audience who's actually doing anything in the field that they went to college for. Just a quick survey. I would just love to know, because that's an interesting point, because, we're so education and academics and college and which I am all for, I believe in higher education. But if you're actually not learning anything, if you're only being told what to learn, what to do, or how to think, that's not really learning, right?
No, it's just test passing. And the thing I think is completely ironic is I went to school for marketing, for business and stuff like that. The stuff that I learned is completely outdated. This is a new world. Now, I'm from the 80s. I was born in 1980. So I was analog. I had record players and stuff and tapes, but then I got into CDs and then obviously digital and iPhones and that kind of stuff. So I've lived through this huge shift in technology. So I think another thing we have to realize as parents is that, not only do we not know it all, but there is so much that hasn't even been discovered yet that our kids that'll be their norm. Our children are growing up with on-demand cartoons, shows, video games. We thought the Jetsons was like crazy. That is literally their lives for the most part. So we have to keep up. We have to catch up and then keep up, because I think if we're trying to go back to those analog days, everything is not doesn't need to continue. And so, you do have to let that go and evolve right along with them, because they have it. I mean, really, when you look at you could have wondered about song lyrics. You couldn't just Google it. You had to either listen, record it, or hopefully they had it in the cover that came. It's so they have the world, anything they want to know is at their fingertips. Right. So we have to come alongside that and be like, you know what? Maybe you don't need to memorize this, or maybe you don't need to, because if you can, to me, I'm more focused on skills. And I think that's really what I tell new moms, when I was mentoring and things, there are certain things that, as an adult you have to know. You have to know about, certain level of math. You need to understand how the world works. You need to have, common sense. But a lot of this stuff that we think kids need to memorize, they don't, because it's literally at the tip of their fingers, in their back pocket or whatever. It's a lot on us. It's a lot. And a lot of things, that's another thing in the book. I just want people to know that it's not as hard, as you think, but a lot of it is on you, and not just the facilitating, but just who you are and how you're growing. That really matters too. So if you're trying to just focus everything on the kids, you're going to miss it. I don't want people to miss it, because it's special for everybody.
Yeah. You said in your book just about the right way to homeschool is only found through unwavering pursuit of authenticity. So I think it goes on to say that by defining your family's vision of success and by doing things differently than the mainstream. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about. You make such a good point about how much has changed over the last 20 years. And prior to that shift, things had been done and working the same for decades, right? Like our parents grew up and there's always been pushback and cultural change, but there wasn't the mass change the way that we have seen. It's like speeding up almost. So to think that I should know there's better ways now. So like going back to that idea, like if your child is struggling in something, let's find a better way. We don't have to like buckle down and get it done. But I'm guilty of it, Camille. My 11-year-old, like she has to get her math done. And if it's an hour later and she's starting to get frustrated and teary-eyed, I'm still like, is it done? Instead of saying, shut the book. You did a great job. You're done for today. I have to retrain myself that I need to follow. It does her no good to be frustrated for the last half hour of math. She's not getting it. Just because she's putting stuff on paper, that makes me feel better as the homeschool mom that she's checking it off the list.
Yes.
It's not it. Then that's about me and not about her.
Oh, yes.
There's no wrong to say she can pick it back up tomorrow, right where she left off. But why am I so insistent? Like,
well, I think it's a cultural thing where adults. I think it's a lot of things. It's cultural. It's fear. It's ego. We feel this pressure too, just as homeschoolers. Like, you don't want to miss something. You don't want them to have gaps, and that's all parents, because we're fed this lie of kids will have gaps if they don't do things by a certain age. And I'm just like, I learned so much when I got out of school. I don't feel like any gaps I may have had, and we're all going to have them no matter the path we take. And we're never going to all know everything. That's impossible. But it's just, I don't think it's our fault. I think it's just how we grow up. And so that's the opportunity for our children to change that narrative, to change that conditioning. Because a lot of it's, at the end of the day, I think is really based in fear. In love, we really want to do the best we can for them. But sometimes we just have to really be honest and say, I don't know what I'm doing. and I tell my kids that, look, I don't know. Like, we can, and it's not even so much, let's look it up. It's like, I don't know. And I'm okay with that. I think it's just a personal decision to be like authentic, to just be real, and to tell them. I grew up thinking my parents, my mother in particular, knew so much. She just knew everything. She was just good at everything and she handled everything right. And I'm like, well, I'm sassy. Why am I, I shouldn't be like this. I should be. But then I realized, like, honestly, she wasn't showing me all of who she was. I never wanted to do that. I wanted my kids to know I'm human. I make mistakes. I don't always know. And that's okay. And I think that just hopefully it gives kids the space to mess up. But not mess up so bad because they're still under our wing. I don't know. I just think it's a personal thing. And I think if people are just committed to doing the best they can and letting go of what other people think, and, knowing that if I'm teaching my kids how to learn more than what to learn, then my kids will be all right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I tell my girls all the time, and in all honesty, like, I believe this. I went to college. I have a bachelor's. I also have a master's degree. If you know how to read and comprehend what you're reading, you can pass any college course. Truly. Yeah. And that's not to say that there isn't value in the learning. I'm a huge believer in secondary education, higher education. But if you're not processing the information to where you've learned it, you can critically think about it. Like, I was like, you're reading a book, you understand it. That's that's what higher education is. Like,
That's
good
point,
job.
right?
Good job, you guys. We're nailing it. We're doing a great job with this. I love in the book, you address people who are critical or have questions about parents who choose to homeschool. And one of the advice that you give parents is to just not talk about it. And I thought that was brilliant because, as you can see, I'm a talker. So I feel this, right? I want to put on this shroud of, I need to convince people that I am right. And I need to open up their mind to my truth. And I have found, even with my children, they don't want to know my truth.
No, that's right. It doesn't really matter. Yeah, that it's true. Anything I've put in that book, I've been through. I've had, family members just not quite get it. And so I was like, well, it's okay if you don't get it. I'm a Leo, so I'm very much like, you need to understand me. You need to feel where I'm coming from. But over time, it's exhausting. And at the end of the day, I really have to ask, does it really matter, if they agree? That is not something that everybody can do. I understand. But I think it's better for you, especially when you're new. If you don't think that person or these people, or even online, people you don't know, are going to support you, don't even waste your time. I will tell you this. A lot of times people tell people things because they're looking for the external, confirmation, like I'm doing okay. And they can't, other people can't give you that. Your kids can't even give you that. It's really you being okay with what you're doing. In every stage of homeschooling, you can have been doing it forever and something happens and turns your world upside down. The only thing that builds your confidence is in the doing. So if you keep going, one of the things I always tell my audience, my peeps, I call them, keep going. It's up and down. It's an emotional roller coaster. You're just going to go through it all because it's life. There is no difference. But yeah, yes. It's no joke, but it's such, like, if you can really, the community is important. I always tell people, unfollow folks. If it's me that you feel like I'm doing too much for you and you're feeling bad, unfollow me. I'll be here. It's really just being honest with yourself and getting to know yourself. Homeschool will make you know yourself, whether you want to or not. And that's a good thing, even if it's hard at the time.
Well, and I think maybe that's the biggest difference between a positive homeschool experience and a negative homeschool experience for parents. Because I know even when I was in the beginning and struggling to check all those boxes, I thought I was presenting to my children, a strong homeschool mom. I mean, they could, honestly, don't know that they could have verbalized it, but they could see that I was barely holding on, right? But I felt like I was doing such a great job because all the boxes were checked in, and I'm miserable inside. And as moms, we know that comes out in different ways. The amount of yelling I did when they were younger, and we were and I was trying to control these thinkers that are out, it's like, thank God for progress.
Yeah. And you know what? I think too, what I realized that a lot of what I was doing, because I did that, I still do that occasionally, is anxiety. Like, I had to realize it's not like a clinical diagnosis or anything like that, but I'm somebody who realized like I don't know if I have sensory stuff, but I can get overwhelmed. I'm definitely an introvert. I'm an empath. I feel people's energy and it becomes too much. And so when you're dealing with your kids all day, no matter what their ages are, unless they're kids that are very independent, you're going to be in all these different spaces and times and attitudes. And, it's a lot for one person. So what I had to do is figure out coping mechanisms for me, because like when we're doing the yelling, it's not even that just we're not being heard or we want to control. It's like, it's probably like a sensory overload. It's like a lot of things we can't even explain that just come out in a yell. Right. And so I had to like develop things like I wear headphones a lot. They're not on, but there's just like a buffer between me and the noise of just the kids being kids, so a lot of times I encourage moms, like we talk about self-care and taking time, but sometimes in those moments, it's not about self-care. It's just like, I need to survive this moment. So what can I do besides like going nuts and hiding. What can I do in those moments? So, I like to make sure that moms aren't like denying this might be some type of anxiety I'm feeling that's masks as, oh, the kids just aren't acting right, or I'm not doing enough. It's just really, I just can't deal right now because I'm human. Right. And that's what happens, especially with kids, little kids, especially when they can't read yet. I think that's when a lot of parents are starting to homeschool, and it's like, why is it so hard? Well, if the kids can't read, how are they going to be independent? There's a process, Yeah. But yeah, it's always about encouraging yourself, like it's 1 second at a time. If we need to scrap, there are many days I scrap the day, like forget this, we're going outside. I always tell people, go outside. Go take yourself outside. If it's on the porch or the deck, go outside. Make sure your kids are secure, because you need to figure out how to not lose it. Because in the first few years, you're gonna feel like I don't. What did I do? Yeah, and that's normal. Right. But people don't talk about that. But it is absolutely normal.
So I have two triggers that my kids know. Like, mama needs a space. I will start singing it. It'll go into a sing song, like I'm trying to hold it in. So I'm going to sing it nicely. But if that doesn't work, then I'm going to explode. Yes. And then the other one is, if I start deep breathing, they're like, back out of the room. Right. Like, she's going to blow. Right. But we laugh, but I'm telling you what, after they figured out my signs, it's a brilliant work. And now that my oldest two are 15, when I start doing that, they can verbalize and say, Mom, do you need help with something? Is there something going on that we can help you with? And my pride in the beginning of that, like, oh, no, I'm your mom. I got it. I have it all together. But in the being authentic, I'm like, guys, my mind is racing and I hear you asking me things and there's no space for me to be able to process all of this. So I need a little bit. Please don't ask me right now. And they'll be like, okay. Like, it's a partnership with our kids as well. And granted, now I've come through and I have some older children. And so I think that partnership grows.
Absolutely. Yes.
And it's a little bit, like you're saying, it's a little bit easier. But if you teach your children from a young age to know, like, I'm starting to deep breathe, like, probably wise if you go play with your toys for a little bit. There's actually, that's a good thing for your kids to know. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, it's self-regulation. The things that they need anyway, the tools that you're using for yourself can work with them too. There is no age limit. So if it's deep breathing, that's what I do with my daughter. She has some, emotional and developmental things going on. So it is a thing of, you can't approach every kid the same. Some kids, they just need a minute, but other kids, you actually need to teach them, like, okay, let's do our deep breaths, or let's talk about it. Yeah, and it starts when they're younger. And I love how you mentioned partnership. That is absolutely what I've learned. This is a team effort. This is me. I'm not the coach all the time. Some of the kids, they lead the way, especially when they get older, as they get older. But we're partners in this. I'm here to support you. I'm here to facilitate for you. It gets easier as they get older, obviously. But when they're little, I think a lot of times we're trying to do too much, and they just don't need as much as what we're offering. It's overwhelming. With school, I think it's probably easier because this is what we're doing, and the teacher has 100% certainty of her job. These are my goals because they're external goals. But when you're homeschooling, you have to figure all that kind of stuff out. But it's so helpful to have these kind of discussions with moms and dads who have been there, and we know what it's like to feel defeated and like, I don't know what I got myself into, to come out the other side like I was doing well all along, but I just needed to hear it. So if anybody is out there feeling like, oh, I gotta quit, I'm not sure what I'm doing, that's normal. And we're here to tell you we're surviving and thriving and our kids are doing well. But we know what it's like. It's not easy, but it gets better. It gets better.
Yeah. It's interesting. I keep hearing this phrase. It's simple, but it's not easy.
Right. Yes.
So it's simple. And if we would just do the simplicity, work with the simplicity of it, I think we're the ones that complicate it. Like I'm
Yes.
saying, like you get your box of curriculum and then you think, well, it says I have to do it on this day. So I don't care what kind of day we're having, we're going to do it on this day.
Yep.
And even as an advisor for a curriculum company with Bookshark, like I tell parents, you have autonomy. Once that box comes to you, it's there for your comfort to know that you have what you need, but you have autonomy with anything that you have. Like I constantly, even now at 42, have to tell myself, I'm an adult.
Right.
I can make this decision. I'm in charge
That's
of
right.
my life here. But I
Mhm.
think, coming out of, public schooling for the first half and then homeschooling the second half and then going into college for all those years, it's like my mind still gets tripped up. Like somebody needs to tell me what's the next step instead of being creative and going, okay, well, what's the next step? My daughter said to me yesterday, she was texting me from upstairs and she said, hey, I lost the document that I'm supposed to use to continue my language arts project today. And I was like, okay, close up the book, be done with language arts today. Like, are we going to stress about finding that document? And now the Jana 2 years ago would have been like, oh my gosh, we got to find this, and freak out. And it's just like, oh, great. You're caught off early today. Good job.
Yep.
Like I'll be upstairs in a little bit. But that's something that I've had to give myself permission to do because she still is learning. She'll write another essay, she's going to be okay.
Right.
And I don't know. I just feel like you said, we're relearning. You talked about how be a garden, not a teacher.
Yeah.
And I just find that resonates with me personally because a gardener puts the seed in and he can't make it grow.
No.
Right? Water and fertilizer, and you do all that you can for the best outcome, but he's not digging it back up every day to see if it's growing because he has no control over that.
Absolutely. That was when I realized that on my own, it was such a revelation and it was such a relief, really. Because at the end of the day, when our children become adults, we've done all we can. Obviously, we can still guide them and help them, but they have to make their own decisions. So I guess my mother always taught me, begin with the end in mind. Okay, what do I want them to have by the time they leave my house? And so if I look at and I list the things that I want them to have, a lot of it doesn't come from those books that I order or those worksheets that I print. It comes from our experiences and just the natural progression that life offers. So yeah, and I actually started a much bigger garden last year, which inspired me. And I realized now it did really well, but I don't take the credit for that. I did what I could. I put the seeds where I thought they would grow best. I gave them what I thought they needed the most. And then I just hoped for the best, and so that, that analogy really speaks to life, but it especially speaks to homeschooling because there is such a huge level of involvement that you think you need to have, but most of that involvement is just time with your kids. It's not, hovering and making sure they're doing everything, because a lot of it, your kids are going to learn so much from you anyway, whether you sit down and tell them. I can't remember most of what my parents said, but I absolutely remember what they did and what we did together. So I guess I just never, and I always encourage people, do not forget what it was like to be a kid. I think if you can really connect with your younger self and tell your younger self, oh, I can see what you needed back then. And now I can try to provide that for you here as a healing, from that, and try not to make that same mistake with my kids. So yeah, I remember being a kid at like 11, like I'm never going to forget what it's like to be a kid. I remember telling myself that, and I never have. So it makes it really easy to relate to my kids because I'm like, I know a lot of this stuff, but I had to learn it, and it took a long time. And a lot of stuff I didn't even learn. I learned with them.
Right.
So yeah, it is. It's just trying to remember that your kids they're really doing their best, and you're doing your best. And that's really absolutely good enough. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that those who are listening right now are hearing the heart behind what Camille and I are saying, that we just really want to be an encouragement to you guys, that there is no right or wrong way to homeschool your children. And I love the idea of reconnecting with our younger selves. I was a very I had a goofiness to me that I lost for a number of years as I was a young mom and bogged down with the day to day. And again, now that my children are older and I'm kind of goofy, and they just laugh at me and they're like, "Why are you such a dork?" And I'm like, "Because I can be." Because
Right.
when I'm walking around Walmart, I don't care what anyone else thinks about me. I like that I'm making you laugh.
Yeah.
That's what matters to me. Not if these people over here think I'm an immature and, have issues. I mean, they're half right, maybe all right, but but
That's
to show my
perfect.
kids that, that like you can still laugh, you can still have fun. As an adult, we don't have to become
Yes.
something that we're
Yes.
not, to fit a mold that really we're imposing on ourselves, because nobody's asking us to be that way. We just came up with this idea. Our society's kind of perpetuated this cycle, but I think it's time to break the cycle and just be real.
Yeah, I just talked about that yesterday on Instagram. I did a quick live and I talked about how I'm loving seeing all the homeschool moms like do reels and do TikTok and do these, the voiceovers that they do on TikTok. I'm not on TikTok, but I've seen them. And I'm like, I'm seeing your personality. I'm seeing that you're funny and that you can act a little bit and that you can dance. And I started roller skating and I put it on my reels because this is what I'm doing. And I'm not just a homeschool mom. I'm a person. And so when your kids get to see you for who you are, it's one thing to say you can be whatever you want to be. And, I'll love you unconditionally. And, whatever you do is good. But then you hold back yourself. They know that, so if they can see you making all the mistakes or growing, I'm doing business and things like that. I show my kids because I want them to see I'm not just telling you that you can do whatever you want to do. And, that adulting is serious, but it's also fun too. I'm not just telling you that, I'm showing you that, so it's very important for us to show up as ourselves to that homeschool table, that homeschool picnic table, outside, wherever you're going to do it, because they need to see that, that's more important than anything, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we hope that you've been encouraged today. Camille, I want to thank you for taking the time to be on with us and just tell us about your book. Again, Coming Home is the title of the book. There is a link. Be sure that you guys enter to win at the top of that chat box, a copy of it. And Camille's social media and website, The Intuitive Homeschooler, is on our landing page. So if you guys want to reach out to her and send any questions you have to info@bookshark.com, and we'll get them answered for you if we can. So thank you, Camille. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you. Thank you guys for being here. I had a good time.